From the low desert in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, this is Politics and the Past with Ferguson, brought to you by the Center for American Institutions. I am joined today by people uh, somebody in Omaha and Andrew, who is Andrew Ritter, who's all the way on the other side of the world, who woke up at 5:30 in the morning for this. Andrew, how's Singapore?
No, it's going great, but I got 3 complaints. This place is more humid than Houston, but it rains, so it cancels out. There's no public outlets, so it's hard to charge my phone, and it's not really a complaint, but the people are a little reserved, so it's kind of a culture shock to get used to, but America has some things to learn from Singapore. I'll just keep my comments there.
We'll
It's
have
a
to
gr
save that for you. We'll have to save that for another episode.
Of course.
Um, and our special guest today is Dr. Sher Jan Ahmadzai, the director of the Center for Afghanistan and Regional Studies at the University of Nebraska-Omaha. Thank you very much for coming on, Dr. Ahmadzai. It's great to meet you.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with you.
Dr. Ahmadzai, if it's okay with you, I'd like you to maybe walk us through your experience a little bit here, and maybe what you focus on at the center that you're the director of.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, first of all, calling me doctor. I'm yet to earn that title. In the process of it.
Okay.
Appreciate calling me in advance. Hopefully in a couple of years I'll get that. Um, Coming to your question on what's going on in Afghanistan and the region concerning Pakistan, whatever happens there, of course, impacts the whole region and how we do in what we do in our center, what we have been doing. Our center was established in 1972, and we have been in work for the last 54 years. We primarily focused on Afghanistan, with our some of our faculty members teaching at Kabul University. Actually, our first sister university was Kabul University. We established this relationship with them in 1975. We sent our first batch of study abroad students in 1978 to Afghanistan, from here, from Omaha, and we had faculty members from there since then. Till a few years back, before the collapse of the previous regime, we have had exchanges coming faculty members to UNO and researchers to UNO on different grant opportunities that were funded by the federal government. And we've had engagements and worked with multiple universities across Afghanistan, and trained thousands of teachers in the last 20 years, I would say, before the collapse of the government over there in 2021. We trained almost more than 8,000 teachers through different teaching training programs, and we work with many faculty members. We established degree programs at a couple of universities over there. We redid the curriculum for American University of Afghanistan, which is now online university based in Qatar, in Doha, Qatar. We work Kabul Polytechnic University. We work with faculty from other universities, and we had activities here on campus for our student population and community members across Omaha, where we would provide them with opportunities to be exposed to speakers and activities and cultural activities and other engagements for Afghanistan. When I took over the center in 2016, I expanded our scope from Afghanistan beyond to Central Asia and South Asia, because we were already doing activities and partnerships with universities and other institutions of higher education in Central Asia, for example, in Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan, and then in South Asia, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Nepal. We've had visitors, scholars come here. We had researchers conducted in the region. So it made sense to expand it beyond Afghanistan. And that's why we renamed our center, the Center for Afghanistan and Regional Studies. And I teach a class on geopolitics of Central Asia, South Asia on campus. So that covers all of what we have been doing for the last 54 years.
Wow. Wow. I mean, so I want to just be clear. So you were training a lot of the teachers who were going into the new schools across Afghanistan in the wake
They
of
were.
the right, in the wake of 2001. And so they were
Yeah.
coming to Omaha, and you were training them, or you were training them there. How did that work?
A combination of both. We did bring a lot of women teachers to Omaha. Uh, Almost 200 of them came to Omaha, different programs, but most of the trainings that we did were for schools was done inside Afghanistan through our training, the trainers program that we train other trainers to continue training, snowballing the effect
Mhm.
and expanding it to other to other schools across Afghanistan. And we worked with a lot of Afghan faculty members from other universities. We brought them here to UNO, and we also took them to third countries with our faculty going and visiting them. For example, we took them to India. We met together in India for different training activities, and in UAE and in Turkey. So we had a different approach when some of them could not come to the United States.
Okay. So, let me ask a hard question. What was it like in 2020, in 2021, pulling out? You obviously had did you have infrastructure and people in the country at the time?
We did. We did. It was a difficult decision to close our office in Kabul, December 2021. It was difficult to operate given the situation over there. Security was an uncertain, and with the loss of funding also, and the loss of our operations area because we were mostly engaged with women teachers in schools, and when women teachers in schools were closed, so there was no service area to provide to. And that made it difficult for us to make a difficult call to close in our office. Most of my colleagues, we had a staff of 10 people for a project office in Kabul, are still in Kabul. Unfortunately, none of them could be evacuated, and they're still in Afghanistan living. But our operations ceased to exist there because our field was education. We couldn't work there.
Mhm. So, I'd initially intended to ask about the geopolitical situation between Pakistan and Afghanistan, but your experience with schools in Afghanistan has got me thinking about a couple of other questions. And so, um, during the peace negotiations between the Taliban and the United States back in 2019, 2020, and 2021, and in the wake of the Taliban's capture of Kabul and the country, there was an effort on the Taliban's part to sort of look like a a kinder, gentler Taliban, especially when it comes to women's education. Even though they said, well, we're not going to allow it quite as it has been under the Americans, but we aren't going to roll it back to where it was maybe when the Americans first arrived in 2001. Wh- From what you've seen, what's the educational picture in Afghanistan right now?
Well, the initial expectation and what we thought would happen was based on what, during the negotiations, many Taliban leaders promised. The word in front of media. Anybody can Google a lot of leaders from Doha where they said women would be able to go to school, they would be able to work. We would preserve many of the gains that we made in the last 20 years. Unfortunately, especially in the women education, that promise was not met. Everybody expected that schools would be open for girls. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Schools beyond sixth grade are closed all over the country, including universities are closed for women. Not even doctors could go to schools and become women doctors. So the promises that were made publicly, unfortunately, were not met. So it presented a totally different picture against our expectations.
Hmm. How long did it take for them to um, go back on their promises? Was it immediate, or was it over the course of a couple of years?
Well, actually, it was a couple of in the course of a couple of months, actually.
Okay.
Less than a few months, where the decree was issued that all schools for women or educational opportunities for women are supposed to cease to exist, and no opportunities were there for them. And the collapse happened in August. There was a gap of about 3 months where schools were completely closed, and we were expecting by March of next year the opening of a new academic year. All the schools would be open, which did not happen. So in the meantime, after that, they claimed that it was announced that it's a temporary decision, but the temporary decision has gone far more than 4 years.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I remember reading that, they sort of promised, well, even in the wake of that decree that like, oh, well, women who had already started university would be allowed to complete it or something like that. But
Yes.
I don't know if that actually, if any of that was, uh,
And none of them have materialized, actually, unfortunately. No women were able to continue their education, both
hmm.
at school level or higher education.
So what, to your estimation, in your estimation, Why did the Taliban go back on their promise?
Well, there are multiple interpretation of the laws, the Islamic laws. According to many leaders in Taliban, it's not having a belief in girls getting modern education. According to the interpretation that they have of the Islamic laws, is that women do not need to provide for their families, thus they don't need education. Men are supposed to provide for the families, thus they need education. And plus, by the word education, the definition is the religious education rather than modern education. So it's a quite a different interpretation than the rest of the Muslim world has of the Islamic laws of Quran. That's a huge difference between how Quran is being interpreted, and many Muslim scholars, including many inside Taliban circles, have uh, express their concerns and objection on this decision. But whoever is in the power in the country right now, they have the steering wheel in their hands, and they are driving the country to the direction as they interpret the laws according to what their interpretation is.
Mm. Andrew, have you got anything you'd like to ask us? Want to get you involved here?
Uh, no, I'm just following along. I'm kind of formulating my own questions as we go along, kind of on like the, I guess like the broader strategic level. But we can pivot to that later. I feel like
Okay.
I think this like right here is a pretty important discussion.
Okay. Yeah. So, you mentioned that there are people inside the Taliban who might have a different opinion on this particular notion, which is
Yes.
a notion that is not held, of course, universally across the Islamic world. There's a diverse array of opinions on this.
Yes.
Um, what is so? Is the faction? I'm assuming the Taliban is divided into factions among whom there are several, with various religious to various, with various religious interpretations. Is that correct?
Correct. That is correct. However, despite all those factions or schism or different interpretations of the Islamic laws among different people in the Taliban government, the decision makers who are making decisions are of the belief, as they are right now, no schools for women. And this difference has not surfaced to a level where that would create a big divide among their policymakers, or that would result in the collapse of a policy choice. Thus far, it has been same policy, despite the differences that have not surfaced at a level where the leadership of Taliban is being forced to go back on his decision and open schools for women. It seems that everything is intact and the shots are called by the higher leadership and authorities in Kandahar.
So if women's education, that I mean, that's something that, even so, you're saying that there's some factions that maybe they don't think maybe they would have allowed it or tolerated it to continue, but none of them are going to rock the boat
Correct.
over it not continuing. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
So
That is the
what
case.
yeah. So what would be some of the issues among the Taliban, like within the Taliban, that you think are more divisive?
Well, most of the time, the divisive could be about how they accept the command from the higher authority or the supreme leader of Taliban. If they have a stronger opinion of how the supreme leader could um, issue edicts or orders, then that would be a divide which could result in a rupture, in a collapse of the state. But thus far, they have been successful, contrary to the expectations of everybody else, to keep the government intact and not create divisions that would surprise everybody across the world or across Afghanistan. So that has been the case. Despite deep differences, they have most of the time and so far uh, considered unity most important than anything else. So everything else comes second. But overall, the group's unity, their government's unity, have been the prime concern, and they don't want to lose that. They have repeatedly said that we have to be united regardless of what the outcome is.
Yeah. So you mentioned the supreme leader a couple of times. Can you talk a little bit about who that is? You mentioned that they're in Kandahar, and I do remember just again from back when Afghanistan was in the news every day, that that's the kind of the more uh, conservative spiritual center of the country.
Correct. Correct. Even in the first government, when they first time came to power in 1996 till 2001, their supreme leader Mullah Omar was based in Kandahar, and Kandahar was called the spiritual religious leadership place for Taliban movement at that time. With the same practice, when they came to power in second time, the same practice was continued. Supreme Leader Mullah Hibatullah Akhundzada still resides in Kandahar with his council of elders or religious leaders. He still dictates all the policies. He still leads the government. However, for operational purposes, bureaucratic system is based in Kabul, the national capital of Afghanistan. But for political and religious reasons, that leadership still resides in Kandahar.
Um, is the Taliban still primarily Pashtun, or has that changed since?
Well, it's an interesting dynamic. Most of them do belong to Pashtun ethnic groups, but they have people from other ethnic groups. For example, the chief of the army staff is not a Pashtun. He is Uzbek from Badakhshan province. And so are many other cabinet members, but majority could be considered Pashtun. But that should not reflect or represent the Pashtun mentality. Unfortunately, it does, where one group has the majority, and the world believes that that's the mentality of a certain ethnic group. However, in Afghanistan, Taliban have made it possible for among themselves to make a sort of a representation of different ethnic groups. I just, for example, named a couple of things, a couple of names there, and what their trade secretary or trade ministers is not a Pashtun, and so are a number of others. Their vice prime minister is also not a Pashtun, and so then many other individuals who are not Pashtun, but majority they are Pashtuns from southern Afghanistan or other parts of the country.
So, is that different from the first time around?
Not much. Not much. I remember the first time of the time I visited Minister of Education. That was 1997. I resided in Pakistan at that time, but I visited, and there were a lot of people who were not Pashtun. They were from Badakhshan province, actually,
Hmm,
where the current chief of staff of the army is.
interesting, interesting. So, aside from how the the women's education and the educational infrastructure has not um, gone maybe according to what their promises were back in Doha, um, what else has significantly changed under the Taliban since they've come back to power in Afghanistan?
Well, if you talk about some of the elements that the Afghan society need was superficially or not, security has improved in a sense. I would say overall there is no war going on where a lot of people were killed every day. Now, only one faction is in power, and there is nobody fighting that faction. So naturally, as expected, there is no war. Who are they fighting? On the other hand, Afghanistan has lost a lot of stuff. For example, in the education field, the development that we had before the collapse of the government, uh, the what we had maintained, that is no more there. For example, recently, um, or every year, there's always a university entrance exam. Previously, 5 years ago, around 200,000 students would sit for exams. This year, only 30,000 could do it. That's a huge drop. That's a huge drop in the number of students that are willing to take a university exam with the hope that they would go to university and have a future. That represents its own dissatisfaction of the population with education and loss of hope in the higher education or education itself, where they see that it is not valued by the authorities, or it is not valued as it was, or they might not face, or they might not see themselves somewhere in the future after they have a degree program, a degree from any university, uh, because the unemployment is also a big issue. the presence of international forces and a lot of money that was coming to the government, most of the people were involved in some sort of employment. They were engaged in doing something. They were getting some salary from their different places. Unfortunately, that is no longer the case. The international assistance dried up. The Afghan economy is in its maybe real shape, which is a very small economy. Government can employ limited people. If they employ, that should be from the people that they support, loyal to the government. On others, NGOs or private sector is not big enough to employ everyone. Thus, unemployment is high. And on top of that one, there is a huge influx of refugees from Afghan refugees from Pakistan and Iran that is adding to the already existing problems, where more than a couple of 100,000 people or 500,000 people have come back from Pakistan who were forcefully turned back to Afghanistan. And the same case was with Iran, where refugees are coming back to Afghanistan, and there is not much enough capacity inside the Afghan government right now, or the Taliban government right now, to absorb all these refugees and provide them with employment.
Sure. Okay, so why are the why are there so many refugees coming across the border from Iran and Pakistan?
Well, that has reasons. The biggest reason is, for example, with Pakistan, is the relationship between Taliban and Pakistan, where the Pakistani governments have been claiming that uh, the current administration in Afghanistan, contrary to their expectations, where initially they expected when Taliban come to power, we will have some influence over them. That influence would result in some of the Pakistani Taliban groups not operate freely in Pakistan or from Afghanistan, be supported. That's the claim they have been making, and they claim that Taliban administration in Afghanistan are not supporting them and not listening to them. So, as a pressure tactic, they have pushed all of the Afghans back to Afghanistan, and have recently, in the last 2 years, have military strikes, air strikes inside Afghanistan, which has not resulted in the death of Taliban leaders, Pakistani Taliban leaders, but it has resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Afghan civilians. For example, there was a attack on a hospital for drug addicts in Kabul. More than 200 people were killed in that civilian were killed in that airstrike. So it has been everywhere in Kabul and other provinces, only affecting civilian population rather than any Pakistani Taliban, as claimed by Pakistan.
Hmm. So, I mean, this stems back, I know, back to the 1970s, the Pakistani, at least to the 1970s, the ISI's relationship, the Pakistani intelligence services relationship with various, with various armed groups inside of Afghanistan, and probably with this, with the original Soviet puppet government too. But so, why do you think? I mean, it was always sort of believed that the ISI was playing both sides,
Yes.
right? Though they were playing both the West and they were playing, and they were certainly playing their own game and getting oftentimes the fear was they were getting the West to do their own bidding and then undermining the forces and the operations that were happening. That's a major history that we probably don't have a chance to relitigate today. But did the ISI massively miscalculate with the second iteration of the Taliban?
Well, from its face, they claim they have miscalculated everything. Because if you look at their defense minister of Pakistan when Taliban were coming into power, he was celebrating it openly, even on Twitter. He said we, in many ways, celebrated the victory of Taliban over the Afghan government. And then recently, after the expectations were not met, they said we misjudged everything, we miscalculated. Um, that could be right to some extent. But given the historic relationship between elements inside Afghanistan and ISI, um, it is not 100%. It could not be 100% true because I think they still hold influence in certain elements inside Afghanistan, but of course they have lost influence in other circles that is not resulting to meet their expectation. Thus, with it resulted in bad relationship or not good relationship between Afghanistan and Taliban administrations right now in Kabul, and it resulted in the influx or forceful departure of Afghan refugees from Pakistan to force the Taliban administration to listen or heed to their demands. That has been the evidence of the prolonged relationship or interference of Pakistani ISI since 1973, or Pakistani government and their expectations of Afghanistan. That's an example of what has been happening for the last 50 years, and I think it's going to continue regardless of whoever is in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this notion that I mean, no, actually, maybe I should make an assumption here. I'm going to ask you, what what does Pakistan see in its strategic interest in Afghanistan? What is the strategic interest there?
Well, the initial calculation was they were betting it against India when they were in war with India, and they thought if there's something happens, they need to have um, a friendly nation in the backyard, which was Afghanistan. Afghanistan has never attacked Pakistan in its history compared to what they happened between India and Pakistan. All the wars that happened, the major wars between Pakistan and Afghanistan, Afghanistan has always maintained its neutrality. Even 1965 war, Afghan government officially told them that don't worry about us, we're not going to attack you. Take up this opportunity. You continue defending yourself against India. But the assumption was that if Pakistan collapses, they need a strategic depth
Mm,
so they can go back and regroup and fight against India. With the nuclear weapons, that idea has collapsed. You don't need a strategic depth when you have nuclear weapons. So, but even then, there are certain dynamics inside Pakistan that does cannot afford a economically prosper Afghanistan or a stronger Afghanistan, because there are other elements such as the identity of different groups in Pakistan, different ethnic groups in Pakistan that associate themselves with other countries such as India and Afghanistan. If you look at the history of Pakistan, many scholars would probably have a different opinion, but I think if you look at the Pakistani identity, it's made up of two identities, Indian and Afghan identity. If you look at the river, Indus River, that divides Pakistan into two portions, east and west, the people to the east more or less associate themselves with, culturally, linguistically, and religiously associate themselves with India. And the people to the west of the river, which is the Pashtun and the Baloch population, they culturally, linguistically, even on their appearances, associate themselves with Afghanistan, in certain degrees to Iran, because of the Baloch and Shia population over there in Pakistan. And that creates a dilemma within the Pakistan creation or establishment or its being existing itself, that Pakistan, some policymakers would like to have their own national identity, and this crash of identity is making it difficult for them to accept anybody else where their own population could look up to or look towards. Thus, with India, they have the natural enemy status forever. With Afghanistan, they cannot afford that too for Pashtun population. That's why whenever there's prosperity in Afghanistan, most of the Pashtuns kind of look towards Afghanistan for identity purposes rather than internally within Pakistan, because to some extent they do not feel that identity inside Pakistan, regardless of the fact that they call themselves Pakistan. Whenever there's identity crisis, they look, we are Afghan, because automatically they call themselves Afghans, and all Pashtuns call themselves Afghans. That is one of the sticking points in the identity crisis of Pakistan, which is making them have a different position against Afghanistan. And on top of that, there's also the question of the border dispute between Afghanistan and Pakistan. The Duran line that was drawn by the British was never accepted by Afghanistan as international boundary, and that is one of the sticking points, bone of contention between both countries.
hmm. So if I recall correctly, and again, this is going off of knowledge from, embarrassingly now a decade ago and probably earlier, the Waziristan region straddles the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, correct?
It kind of does, but most of it is within the political boundaries of Pakistan. The Waziristan is within the political boundaries of Pakistan.
Okay. And is that is that and then I know that's west of the Indus River, but is that predominantly Pashtun
It is.
or Afghan identifying?
It is. It is predominantly 100% actually, I would
Okay.
say.
Okay. Um, And so that would be it would be in the Waziristan region that most of the Afghan refugees would be being pushed from.
No, not exactly. Most of the Afghan refugees did not live in Waziristan region. Most of
Okay.
them live in the rest of the provinces. Most of them live in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and Baluchistan province. Waziristan was part of the federally administered areas of Pakistan. They call them FATA, federally administered tribal areas, which was a remnant system of the British Empire, where they call it a buffer zone between Afghanistan and British India. They call it frontier rather than a border between British India and Afghanistan. And Waziristan is one of those 7 federally administered agencies operating at that time. Now they are not. They are constitutionally now part of the proper Pakistan, but still dealt with under the colonial laws. And that perspective has not changed dramatically or in a higher level.
So what was the excuse then by the Pakistani government in actually pushing out the refugees?
Um, the current relationship between between them and the Afghan government, the current Afghan government, they want
Mm.
but it has a little bit of history. Some of them elements in Pakistan political circles claim that the Afghans have been burdened on their economy, which is not true, because all of these refugees do not depend on handouts from the government of Pakistan, but actually they work, they have businesses, and they rely on remittances from other countries that go into Pakistan. Pakistan does not recognize uh, refugees because it's not signatory to the refugee contract, the international agreement, and they does not recognize them as legal refugees were given legal statuses in, like here in the United States, if refugee comes in, they become legal refugees and state is supposed to provide them with handouts or assistance. Most of assistance that came to Pakistan was international, came from United States or many other international communities that gave directly through UNHCR to Afghan refugees in Pakistan. So the Pakistani government was not responsible to provide for any Afghan refugees in Pakistan. So most of it, the idea came after their relationship with Taliban did not go well as a pressure technique, and to appease the local demand, the political demand, they started pushing people out. Especially it happened in Punjab province and Sindh provinces, then it spread to the other Pashtun-dominated provinces.
Interesting. Okay, you mentioned the same thing happened in Iran.
Correct. The same thing happened in Iran. Relationship between Afghanistan and the Iranian government, especially on the water rights, did not go well, and a lot of Iranians considered the Afghans a burden on their economy, which I'm not sure how far that was true because I don't know much about the ground realities in Iran. The same tactic, political pawn for various reasons, and to appease to their local hardliners.
Hmm. So you mentioned water rights. That's an interesting.
It's
What
another
happened there?
discussion. Yes, another issue between Afghanistan and Iran. There are 2 rivers flowing into Iran from Afghanistan, and one of them is the Helmand River, where climate change has impacted a lot. There is a treaty between Afghanistan and Iran that was signed in 1970s, and Iran was entitled to a specific amount of water every year. But it took more than it was entitled because there was no mechanism to gauge, to measure the water, how much was flowing because of the war. For the last 40 years, there has been a war. Nobody could measure how much water is flowing to Iran. Thus, it has resulted in a lot of water that was misused in Iran, and the climate change that has impacted broader Iranian as Iran as a country, where the demand was higher than they could produce or have water, and then they came back with more demands for water, give us more water, and that also refugees were used as one of the tactics to pressure the Afghan government in the past, actually.
Very, very, very. And what years were that? Where the refugees started to be pushed
Oh,
into
for the last 10
Afghanistan?
years, it has been happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right. In early, was it late January, early February, Pakistan launched a series of significant military attacks inside of Afghanistan. Um, was there a catalyst for that, or was it just building on things that you mentioned going back to several years ago
Well,
when the sorry, go ahead.
the recent attacks from Pakistan, I think, happened a few weeks ago, rather than
Oh,
January. There was a recent one, I think 2 weeks ago.
okay.
Uh, attacked several provinces in Afghanistan. They're in response to, as they claim it, the Taliban attacks of Pakistan attacks inside Pakistan. And they say the Afghan Taliban are giving refuge to those leaders of Pakistani Taliban in Afghanistan, and they're not doing anything against them. So they think they have a right to attack different places where they think Pakistani Taliban reside. On the contrary, we have seen in the media a lot of people that were killed were civilians. I give an example of a hospital in Kabul that where most of them, all of them, were drug addict civilians rather than um, a country that claims they were Taliban leaders. We have not heard in the media where a Pakistani Taliban leader could have been killed or was killed in these attacks. So the news has not been out as claiming a certain leader or element, member of the Taliban, Pakistani Taliban, were killed. Most of the news come out with children or women and civilians being killed.
Well, there's a considerable degree of irony in the sense that the Pakistanis are complaining that the Afghan government is sheltering Taliban, or terrorists that are launching attacks inside of Pakistan. Given the long-standing complaint about the Pakistani government regarding, and complaints that the Pakistanis would make, rightly or wrongly, that coalition forces in Afghanistan would violate Pakistani sovereignty in order to chase down some militant.
It is ironic where when the international community was in Afghanistan fighting then the Taliban, most of the leadership was in Pakistan.
Mhm.
And everybody was saying that Pakistan is giving refuge to these leaders who are attacking the Afghan forces of that time and the international community forces before 2021. And now Pakistan is on the same footing where they say the current Taliban administration is giving refuge to the Pakistani Taliban leaders, and they're doing the same thing as they did, giving refuge to Taliban. So it is very ironic to see they claiming they're the victim of this rather than the people who were, by many international community observers claimed, who were behind all of the Taliban support. There are also a lot of people claiming that the Pakistani Taliban was a creation of Pakistan itself. Well, that still has to be researched further, but it wouldn't be off if somebody says they were also created by certain elements or arrangements or situations within Pakistan that resulted in Taliban Pakistan as a faction that supported Taliban then, and as they claim they're supporting Taliban now.
Yeah, and then you also mentioned, again, just the sheer ability. I mean, morality aside for a second. I don't like putting morality aside, but morality aside for a second. Pakistan admitting that it had, showing that it has the ability to push hundreds of thousands of Afghan refugees out of Afghanistan shows a logistical capability that they basically pretended that they didn't have for 20 years.
Yeah.
About patrolling the border.
Yes, yes, yes. It contradicts past claims. It does. Um, because we have seen evidence that they have the control over population. They have barbed wire all over the Duran line, as the Afghans would call it, but Pakistanis would call it the border. It contradicts a number of claims on all aspects of what we could see right now on the ground.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. So what has
So,
been
I,
has that? Sorry, Andrew, please. No, please jump in, Andrew.
yeah, sure. So I'm somewhat interested in what the, I guess, end goal political calculus of Pakistan is in this war, because there's the obvious problem of the border situation has just gotten uncontrollable to the point where there's military action. Despite let's put all the contradictions and all of that aside. And the first thought that I had whenever I saw that, oh, like the war broke out, I was like, oh, is this an attempt at regime change? I don't think that's necessarily what they're trying to do. That wouldn't make sense for them to do, especially considering the situation's already unstable. But I'm somewhat curious as to what and this is just pure speculation of what you think the end goal that Pakistan is trying to achieve here? Are they trying to teach like them a lesson or something, like just trying to punish them, or just is there trying like a new settlement they're trying to push for, kind of a maintenance of the status quo?
Well, the end goal has always been having a government that is 100% pro Pakistan, where they do not pose any sort of security threat, economic threat, or political threat to the state of Pakistan from its western borders or western portion of the country. They already are having issues with India on the eastern border. The end goal is that. Now, tactics vary. In the past, since 1973, tactics had been giving refuge to different elements of the Afghan society where they were fighting against the governments of Afghanistan at that time, where they would come back and get support in Pakistan and go fight the Afghan government. Even in the 1973, that started it, and then the Mujahideen time, and then the Taliban first government, and then the 20 years of the international presence. Even now, it's the same thing repeating. The end goal is having influence and stronger influence, even on policy making level, where the Afghan government is expected to be obedient to the policies of Pakistan. But what we see right now is definitely not a regime change, because there is no alternative to Taliban in Afghanistan right now. They are not being challenged by any internal force that is strong enough to challenge their authority. And any chaos in Afghanistan is not benefiting Pakistan itself, because a Afghanistan without any sort of governance would result in a proper civil war, where it opens gates to a lot of other groups that could be used or could be against Pakistan or other countries in the region. So not only Pakistan, but also the other countries do not want to have an Afghanistan that is not governed by a central authority such as they have it right now under Taliban.
And you mentioned at the beginning that Pakistan wants a government that's loyal to Pakistan, and I'm interested in I guess kind of the leadership aspect then of the Taliban, because there's a lot I mean a lot of Afghanistan's just so young now from all the war, and so there's a new generation, and I'm wondering if there's somewhat of a, I guess, like a generational divide whenever it comes to the Talibani leadership that's translating to maybe a severance of ties in terms of loyalty to Pakistan.
Well, here's another dynamic. Afghanistan as a country was established in 1747, which was ruled by kings for more than 250 years. For more than 250 years, actually. Pakistan as a country has had only 75 years. Anybody, regardless of who they're loyal to, even if they're 100% loyal to Pakistan before coming to Afghanistan, once they come and they take the realms of power in Afghanistan, then there's another feeling. Then you become the leader of a country that has more than 250 years of experience. And how come you want to be obedient to a country? It's political psychology here at play. Why would you follow a country that is 75 years old, despite the fact that Pakistan is hundreds of times stronger than Afghanistan? But the sheer history, the sheer psychology plays into the factor of leadership itself. It's an older country compared to a newer country. And doesn't matter how loyal a leader is to Pakistan, when it comes and takes the realm of power in Afghanistan, there he becomes the owner of a country that existed centuries before another country. And it doesn't fit in with the psychology of leadership that I have to follow somebody else in a 100% way. The idea of independence or being the leader of your own land is instead it's a inside the chemistry, the psychology of a leadership in Afghanistan. Doesn't matter who that person is. That has been proven in 1992 when the very loyal Mujahideen groups, very loyal to Pakistan, came to Afghanistan. They became their own kings. And that would happen. That happened in the past too, in the British India time, where the British would install a king. He would become his own king of Afghanistan because he was a king. And that's going to continue. It doesn't matter whoever comes into Afghanistan. There will still be the mentality that I'm the leader of Afghanistan. And the 100% loyalty should not be expected. Yes, Better relationship, better policy coordination and collaboration could be expected. But if you say you have to be obeying whatever the other country says, I don't think that's going to happen.
So it's the centuries long history that kind of prevents, and it puts Afghanistan in a unique position because of geography, because of culture, that it just when you're in charge, it's not, and I don't want to say client, but like you can't. It's kind of hard to turn Afghanistan into a client state. And I'm thinking of the Soviet Union putting client states in Eastern Europe. You can't have that and that actually that's a good connection because it's probably, I mean, that's definitely one of the reasons why the Soviet government in Afghanistan failed, is because like you just can't put a satellite government in charge. I mean, and you can look at culture, like the Afghan people are just a very independent people, and that doesn't translate well when you're trying to create or establish a sphere of influence. And like you said, you could establish friendly relations. I mean, the previous government had friendly relations with the United States, but you can't turn it into what some critics would call, oh, it was a client state. I would argue that the Afghanistan of the previous administration wasn't really a client state, as
Correct.
much favorable ties it had,
Correct.
but you just can't do that with
Correct.
Afghanistan.
Correct. We have seen examples of this one when the British tried to install two kings in different eras. It didn't work. It did not work out at all. It was not. It was never a client state. Although, to a large extent of the history of that time, Afghanistan foreign relations was directed or led by the Brits, but still it was an independent state of its own. So that history is still there, and I think it will continue.
So you mentioned that because the Pakistani notion of regime change in Afghanistan isn't really plausible because there isn't really a plausible opposition force. Um, the last time the Taliban was in power, the Northern Alliance was at least able to control some area, right, in Afghanistan between 1996 and 2001. Um, there's nothing like that in Afghanistan at this point.
No, not a strong faction that could threaten the authority of the Taliban government in Afghanistan. No. And the world doesn't want it to, because a fraction is not strong enough. United States doesn't want it to. There is no other fraction that could be strong enough or could be trusted with the power that could be given to an authority. And that's why we have United States has signed this deal in Doha. And I'm sure parts of the hidden elements were fighting the terrorist groups in Afghanistan, like ISIS-K and others who could potentially threaten the interests of the United States. That's why we promised to give them at least $40 million, as has been said, every week to maintain the status quo of economic status quo in Afghanistan. And that's why there is kind of uh, a consensus among the international community to let Afghanistan be as it is right now, rather than stir it into something different.
Mhm. Is is ISIS-K a presence anymore in Afghanistan?
It is there, but it has been badly beaten by Taliban. So they're not at a level where they could pose any serious threat to the authority of Taliban, but it is still there.
Um,
It,
Sorry, Andrew, please.
in terms of foreign interaction, I'm pretty sure Russia recognizes the Taliban government as like the legitimate government of Afghanistan. Do you see kind of like a wave of recognitions following suit after that, or yeah?
No, I have not
Okay.
seen. I have. It's China. Um, it's Russia. It's Uzbekistan, for example. A few other countries have recognized them as the legitimate government, but not everybody has not considered them as the legitimate government that is representative of the Afghan population. More or less, it's more of a practical approach. Practical approach, because those countries need to do business with Afghanistan. They need to be in consultation with Afghanistan, because the potential negative impact or results of not being in touch with Afghanistan are more than being in touch. Because there is no good for anybody not to be engaged in Afghanistan in any manner. But that does not mean they have politically or diplomatically recognized the current administration in Afghanistan. So, like Russia has done it, China has the Taliban ambassador there, Pakistan has the Taliban ambassador there, but they don't recognize it as they used to in their first term, or they used to recognize the previous government in Afghanistan. So does Uzbekistan and a few other countries. But the stance is more of practical reasons, where countries like Uzbekistan and Pakistan, Iran, and others, they have diplomatic relations, but the full recognition is not there yet.
What have relationships been like between the Taliban government and, I mean, I'm not necessarily speaking officially, but and other Central Asian neighbors?
It's based on economy. Every country has its own interest. For example, Uzbekistan has economic interest in Afghanistan. It cannot afford being distant, being closed. So does Turkmenistan. So does Kazakhstan. It's also security concerns, because if they are not in connection or in touch with the current administrators in Afghanistan, there's a possibility of elements that could pose security threats to Uzbekistan or other Central Asian countries. So they have to be in touch, and for the sake of sharing intelligence or information or other thing, they have to be in touch with the current administration in Afghanistan. And they have done a pretty good job of containing those threats within Afghanistan rather than spreading to Central Asia. It's the same thing with China. China has a lot of economic and security interests, and the same thing with Pakistan. And Russia has the same thing issue with Afghanistan. If you remember, a few times there were some bomb blasts, and some of them were ISIS-K or Al Qaeda leaders in the past who were kind of linked to some elements inside Afghanistan. And Taliban have done a decent job in containing all those threats that could pose any threats to Central Asian countries or others. So, for those practical reasons, they cannot afford not be in touch with
Oh
Taliban.
yeah. Andrew?
Um, I'm more interested in and this is pivoting towards the Iran war. How exactly the Iran war is affecting the Afghanistan situation? Because there's from what I know, I mean, there's a lot of Afghan refugees in Iran, and I don't know if they necessarily play a part in this, but I'm sure having a major war kind of on you, in your backyard, playing the role of Afghanistan. You have a major war, and it has global ramifications already on oil and everything. And I'm gonna take a leap, and I don't think Afghanistan's very an energy secure country. So I'm curious as to how the war, just in general, has affected Afghanistan.
Not much, to be honest. The war in Iran, the war between United States, Israel, and Iran has not impacted Afghanistan at a level where it has impacted United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, or Saudi, or other countries around the world. Yes, in global market, Afghanistan is not also alone. It will have its own impact on it, but Afghanistan has other resources. Like the past governments in Afghanistan has maintained good relationship or established new relationship with Central Asian countries. Afghanistan also gets its oil from or gas from Turkmenistan. Afghanistan gets its economic goods from other Central Asian countries. Although the trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan has been closed for the last almost 1 year, no trade between Afghanistan and Pakistan goes, but nothing went bad because they still supply. They get their supplies from Central Asian countries or others. Iran is still very friendly with the current administration in Afghanistan. They have been providing them with all what they need and not impacting anything, because Afghanistan is not a big country of 100 million people. It's 40 million people. The needs are not as big as it could be somewhere else, and the needs are met by the supply so far they are getting from other countries. Yes, Afghanistan is not producing a lot, and it does not have a huge industrial base, and that's why unemployment is huge. But that is not because of the Iran war. That is because of the other elements or dynamics within Afghanistan.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, its structural challenges are sort of independent of what happens in the Persian
Correct.
Gulf.
Correct.
Right. Um, Interesting. So,
It has stopped a route for trading that was coming through Iran to Afghanistan, but it has not caused a big blow yet.
hmm,
And I
interesting.
think that's so interesting considering the war for almost every other country's had some type of negative effect. But it's weird how for Afghanistan, how you would think a country which already has a lot of problems, how it really doesn't affect it that much. But I mean, now that I think about it, it kind of makes sense because like the major, I'm just thinking out of my head right now. The major thing that it's affected everyone is oil, oil, oil. But there's not a lot of oil that you need in Afghanistan to really function in its current state. I find that so interesting. And this is more I like country to country specific than with Iran and Afghanistan. But how do the two in the context of the Hazaras interact. Like, and this also goes back to a broader question of, I guess, like national unity is how is Afghanistan comprising of Pashtuns, Hazars, Uzbeks, like Tajiks, interacting with all these countries who, there are, what's it called again? Farsis in Iran. There's Uzbeks in Uzbekistan in Tajikistan, and there's Pashtuns primarily in Afghanistan, but also some in Pakistan. How has it managed to consolidate its own country and not just become absorbed by its neighbors? I know that kind of just merged into another question, but I
Well,
think it's a question
if
worth
you look
asking.
at it, all those countries were sometime part of those countries were part of Afghanistan before. As we talked about, Afghanistan is more than 250 years old. Half of Pakistan was Afghanistan. Portions of the Pashtun population in Iran were part of Afghanistan. So it's not a fitting environment for those countries to absorb Afghanistan in its own sense, because Afghanistan has its own identity that it has preserved. It has its own social cohesion, despite the differences between different ethnic groups. It has not resulted in the breakup of the country as one country, and that those dynamics are still strong because the population is so much intermixed that it's very difficult to even divide them economically, politically, socially, religiously. Despite all the schism that we have in Afghanistan, it's very difficult to break them apart. Uh, they're they're populated as everywhere. There are Tajiks in Pashtun areas, there are Pashtuns in Tajik areas, so it's difficult to divide. Even in civil war time, when everything was ripe for a breakup in Afghanistan, it didn't happen.
Mm.
So I think that's the whole dynamic. But I cannot say that about other countries around Afghanistan. If the other countries around Afghanistan go through similar situations, there's a strong possibility of them breaking up in small pieces, which happened. 1971 of Pakistan was one example, and this could be true with other countries if that happens. So, in that sense, Afghanistan, I think, will still be as it is right now. It will go ahead because Tajikistan has 7 million people or 8 million people. Tajiks are in Uzbeks and others. Um, they're still different from the Tajiks in Afghanistan. So are the Uzbeks in Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, because the Uzbeks and Tajiks in Central Asia were under the Soviet or Russian regimes for more than 70 years. The whole mentality and dynamics are different than the Afghans inside Afghanistan. So although we are similar in many aspects, but we also create our own identities.
Andrew, have you got a last question?
No, I'll let you have it. I'm
Okay.
good.
All right. So projecting forward, um, where where do you see Afghanistan over the next 25 in the next 25 years? Pick a period here. Will the Taliban likely still be in control? What will its relationship likely be with Central Asian neighbors, particularly with Pakistan? Um, what's uh, what's its
Well,
future look like?
I think if Taliban administration take an incremental approach, as they are doing right now, to different policy perspectives, and then they don't go backwards, but stay as they are, I think they'll maintain the status quo, internally and externally. But there's always a limit to what can be done to an extent. If the policies take Afghanistan backwards and it started not meeting its population's demand, there's potential for a huge change in the country. Could be within Taliban government itself. Maybe some elements in Taliban recognize the fact that the country cannot be taken backwards. It should be either stay as it is or move forward, um, because you cannot lose too much. If you started losing too much, then it's not good for politics, and people will not support it, both economically and politically. I think they are dealing it incrementally with all the policies. I hope there's a time where the leadership recognizes that Afghanistan cannot stay behind. It has to meet its peers in the region. But if Taliban do as they are right now, it could probably survive for the next 5 years, unless there's a pressure internally or from external sides.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, Central Asia, Afghanistan, uh, along with many of its neighbors, it's an increasingly important strategic area for the entire world. And it's always been important, but I think it's going through a period where it's going to be incredibly
It
important again.
is. Indeed, it is. I think given um, any country in that region can play a constructive or destructive role, because the world has become so much interconnected that if you move one element, the vibration is felt somewhere else too. And Afghanistan is not spared from that uh, nature of relationship between countries and human beings. So whatever happens in Afghanistan, for good or for bad, it will impact other countries around it.
Well, thank you very much, Sher Jan. I really appreciate your time. Andrew, appreciate you getting up at 5:30 in Singapore. Very grateful, and thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate your time.